Today on This Week in Iowa, we're breaking down shocking numbers about the governor's race. Then, why Libertarian candidate Jake Porter wants his voice heard, plus a conversation about health care motivating Iowa voters. And what is Iowa doing to curb our human trafficking problem? Thanks for joining us here on This Week in Iowa. I'm Sabrina Ahmed. A political poll is going viral in Iowa, and we have the man who created it on This Week in Iowa. 538 is a website that focuses on polls, namely politics, sports, and economics. And this week, there are some new polls from the website about Iowa's governor's race and the congressional districts. 538 has Democrat Fred Hubbell coming out ahead of Governor Kim Reynolds on election night with an 84% chance of winning. We spoke to the man behind the data, Nate Silver, to ask him, how did you come up with those numbers?
For one thing, it's seeing there are not very many polls in Iowa. We could definitely use several more. But you do have the Democrat ahead by margins between 2 and 5 points in recent polls. Also, it's a blue year. Iowa is a swing state. So the model assumes if I don't have a lot of polls that usually Democrats will do well in a swing state in what looks like a blue year where Democrats are polling fairly well.
The 3rd Congressional District, Congressman David Young's seat, favors his Democratic challenger Cindy Axne as well, according to the 538 poll. Silver says this district's data is also interesting.
Where you see the Democratic surge everywhere else, and actually the place where Democrats are doing the best in the polling is up and down the Midwest. This is a pretty educated district and a pretty educated state. In a lot of other districts like it, you see the Democratic candidate doing really well. So the polls are close in that district, but our model says based on factors apart from the polls, meaning national polls, meaning polls in other districts that are a lot like Iowa's 3rd. That's why it tilts it just a slight bit toward Axne.
We've also got the latest Polk County early voting numbers. These are pretty interesting. Just when there were just 19 days left before Election Day, the Polk County Auditor says his office has received nearly 12,000 completed ballots. More than 7,800 of those are from Democrats. About 2,200 are from Republicans. Okay, so after months of growing, the first legal medical marijuana has been harvested in Iowa. MedFarm Iowa is the only cannabis facility in the state. So this right here that we're seeing is video of when we toured their facility in Colorado that Iowa's facility is being modeled after. This week, MedFarm has unveiled 3 different products: cannabis capsules and creams and cannabis oil known as tincture.
There's too many people who've been waiting too long for this, so it's really important to us that we're able to deliver these products on time, have everything roll out very smoothly, and honestly make it as easy as possible and as painless as possible for our patients to get that first round of treatment.
We are going to take a quick break, but coming up next, there's a 3rd candidate on the gubernatorial debate stage that's missing, and he wants a voice for voters. What are Iowans going to learn from Jake Porter?
Congratulations to the Local 5 political team, awarded a regional Emmy for program Medicine in the Making. And congratulations to Local 5's Elias Johnson, awarded a regional Emmy for his work as a video journalist. To view these and other local stories you won't see anywhere else, go to weareiowa.com.
When I played 6-on-6 in high school, our coach made it clear, training hard was the only way to win. It's as true in the real world as it was on the court. That's why I'm a fan of skills training and trade school programs, so students of all ages can learn the career-building skills that lead to good-paying jobs, whether or not college is right for them. I'll make sure vocational programs get the funding they need to clear the lane and set up every Iowan for a shot at success. I'm Cindy Axne, and I approve this message.
Switch to U.S. Cellular and get $600 off the latest smartphones. No trade-in required. Go with another carrier?
Be smart. Box smart.
And get knocked out by a bad deal.
What? You got this, kid.
Don't get knocked out. Switch to U.S. Cellular and get $600 off the latest smartphones. No trade-in required. Plus national coverage in the middle of anywhere.
It's frustrating that our current governor is funding corporations more than schools. Education is not prioritized in the budget at all. Something has to change because our kids are not being served.
We all know we need to give more funding to our K-12 public schools. It takes working together to make sure our teachers have the support they need in their schools to be able to deliver top-notch education. We need to raise our expectations because we need to get back to being the best in the country again.
From the capital city, you're watching This Week in Iowa with Sabrina Ahmed, getting to the heart of what's happening in Iowa politics.
Welcome back, everyone. Jake Porter is with us now, and he's the Libertarian candidate for governor. Jake, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So we are just 2 weeks away from the midterm elections, and you've been making a lot of noise lately about not being included in the debate stage with your opponents, Fred Hubbell and Kim Reynolds. Of course, Fred Hubbell being the Democrat and Kim Reynolds the incumbent Republican. So what have your conversations been like with the debate hosts about not being included in those debates?
Well, first of all, I think we got more publicity by not being in the debates than we would have got had they just let us in the debates. So that's been great. I mean, op-eds in the biggest newspapers. Cedar Rapids Gazette wrote an editorial saying that we should be included. So it was pretty interesting. We had to go through the Hubbell campaign to actually find information if we were going to be included in the debates, what the criteria was. Most of them wouldn't even interact with us at all. For one of them, the debate they had well, a few days ago over at KTIV, they had originally invited me, then they rescinded their invitation at some point and established criteria after the fact. You know, KCCI didn't even have criteria. So it's pretty interesting.
So the after-the-fact criteria, some of it has said you have to be receiving 15% in the polls, but you...
But it was interesting because Hubbell and Reynolds weren't at 15% in the polls either at that point because there was no polls released. So I found that kind of odd.
Okay, so talk to me about how you can fix this problem. I mean, don't you believe that there should be some criteria? Otherwise, anybody could be in the debate.
Well, yeah, there probably should be criteria, and we wish the debate hosts would have set criteria up front. That way we knew what to meet. And, you know, they've changed things around back and forth. It was impossible to know. We would have made the criteria for the Iowa Public Television debates. However, they're not having them this year. But I don't think they will try to keep us out in the future because I think we've made enough publicity. And it's only drove us higher in the polls, you know. We're at 7% in the polls about a month ago. I think that's only going to increase as we get closer to election.
Talk to me about what you think Iowa voters are missing by not having you on the stage. What issues do you believe you could have brought up that weren't brought up, or what do you believe that the debate would have covered?
Well, I think it would have been a lot more positive than what it was. You know, you've seen a lot of back and forth. We talk about, you know, Yonkers, things that happened 30 years ago, who paid what in taxes, who released their tax information, a lot of things that really don't impact the average Iowans. I would have liked to talk about things like criminal justice reform. You know, the fact is our prisons are overcrowding. You know, in the next 7 to 8 years, they're going to be at 142% capacity. I would like to address things like that, mental health, substance abuse, a lot of important topics that I think were kind of left completely out of the debate.
The Libertarian Party has been a major party in the state since 2017.
Correct, yes.
So what have you specifically done to educate voters about the Libertarian platform, about your platform, since that happened? Well,
so I've advised and helped the candidates out that we had run in 2010 and 2014 for governor. We almost got major party status in 2014, missed it by about 1,800 votes. But back then, we weren't getting a whole lot of media coverage. As being a non-political party organization, it was very difficult. So we've been doing as many media interviews as possible, op-eds in the Des Moines Register, speaking around the state, traveling the state, doing statewide tours. I'm doing TV interviews, it seems like, every other day now, newspaper interviews about every day, radio interviews. So we've been doing that. We've ran a lot of ads online ads, YouTube ads that have reached a lot of people. So we're doing our best to spread the message out there that there is another option.
I do want to get to the ads in just a minute that you've run, but you have a background of running. You did run unsuccessfully for Iowa Secretary of State for the Libertarian Party in 2010 and 2014.
Yes.
Why run for governor? Why change what your strategy is?
Well, I talked about some issues back then, and some of which have been implemented now. One of them was, back when I ran as Secretary of State in 2014, was making sure that you can pay by credit card to file businesses. At the time I started running, it was 2013, you still couldn't pay by credit card. So what business would operate like this? So that was important, and we achieved what I thought our mission was. This time I'm running for governor because I have ran statewide before. I think the Libertarian Party, we need to keep that major party status. We have to get 2% in this race, and I think I'm a good candidate to do that. And I think I've been out there spreading the message for a long time, so I think we can do that.
At last check, 7% in the polls. I mean, do you feel sometimes like, gosh, I mean, you won't win? Do you feel like, or maybe do you think you will? I mean, do you feel defeated? I mean, what is that like?
No, if we look at the way that other parties have won throughout history, you know, one was, okay, we could do like the Republicans did. They were once a minor party. They ended up replacing the Whig Party back in the 1850s, and they didn't do it exactly overnight. They did it quick, but they had to build up an organization, so they ran for a lot of races that maybe they didn't win that year. Or if you also look at the other examples, you know, the Prohibition Party, the Socialist Party, neither one of them won a lot of elections, but they started getting 5, 10, 15%. And what happened was that the other parties stole their ideas. We ended up with the prohibition of alcohol. We decided that's a bad idea. We got rid of it. Socialist Party got direct election senators, and most things they wanted passed through the New Deal. So the Democrats adopted their issues. So by talking about these issues, we're going to win no matter what happens. I'd like to keep our major party status and force whoever wins to discuss things like criminal justice reform, budget reform, and looking at all the state departments and agencies.
Jake Porter, a pleasure. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
We'll take a short break, everyone. We'll be right back.
Whether my kids are playing or not, these soccer fields are a constant reminder to me.
The next generation is looking to us to teach them the Iowa values of integrity and hard work.
Karen Derry, a mom who went back to law school when her kids were in school. A common sense leader.
I'm Karen Derry, and I'm running because it's time Central Iowa families had an independent leader in the Iowa House.
Karen Derry for Iowa House.
They put their lives on the line to defend our freedoms. As a military family with 2 in the Marines, Dave and Terry Loebsack understand that firsthand. It's why Loebsack wrote a law extending the GI Bill to reservists and National Guard and worked with both parties to pass the Wounded Warriors Act to reduce bureaucratic backlogs and improve care for veterans.
I'm Dave Loebsack, and I approve this message because it's time to do what's right.
I have a house, 2 cars, a son who's changed his college major 4 times. Retirement? Seriously? So Clear in 10 makes sense to me. It gives us a chance to consolidate our debt into 1 monthly payment and save money. Fixed low rate, 10 years, done. So we can do the things we want to do. If only the rest of life was that simple.
Clear in 10, a new kind of home equity loan from Greater Iowa Credit Union. Get living.
This year's Iowa income tax cuts will save working families an average of $1,000 per year. Amber Gustafson wants that money back. Gustafson called the tax cuts a nightmare and will repeal them, taking money away from working families and killing thousands of jobs. For Iowa families, Amber Gustafson is the real nightmare. Jack Whitfer will protect our tax cuts while working to expand access to affordable health care, strengthening schools, and bringing family-supporting careers to Iowa. Vote Jack Whitfer for Iowa Senate.
You're watching This Week in Iowa, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Iowa.
Welcome back. We are joined now by Max Shelley, a political professor at Iowa State University. Mr. Shelley, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so we want to talk about health care and how this issue is impacting Iowa voters for the midterm election season, which is 2 weeks away. When we say health care, tell us what falls under that umbrella.
Well, first of all, healthcare is the #1 polling issue. If you ask people what they're most interested in, it's that, kind of followed by jobs and the economy. But when they talk about healthcare being the #1 concern, it does include a lot of different things. For some people, it includes taking care of an elderly parent, the kind of decline of abilities that comes with older age that involves all sorts of health-related issues. For others, it's a matter of dealing with chronic conditions. Others, on a more politicized level, it's about the Affordable Care Act, whether that would continue, and if so, in what particular form. We do have a major issue in Iowa regarding Medicaid, the raging issue about whether the privatization of Medicaid was the right thing to do. That's a pretty flashpointy kind of partisan divide, and it drives a lot of the discussion.
Does mental health?
Mental health absolutely as well, yeah. And both of the major gubernatorial candidates have been doing a very good job, I think, trying to accentuate that issue. The current governor has been saying that she's passed legislation and put funding into mental health. You know, her predecessor as governor was criticized for reducing mental health facility availability, and that's something the Democrats have picked up on. Plus, Hubbell's status in the campaign, and platforms enunciated by a lot of other Democratic candidates for other offices in the state, have been very focused on saying that it was a mistake to get rid of those kinds of services or to reduce them, and that more funding ought to be put into them. Then you start getting into all sorts of other side issues about budgets and deficits and such.
Because it is the #1 issue when Iowans and Americans are polled is health care, do you think that's why? Is it political that these candidates are talking about it? Is it strategic, or do you really think that there will be change coming from this conversation?
Well, it's tactical, it's strategic, it's very programmatic. Elections, you could argue, basically won or lost by who can sway independent voters. You assume that 80–90% of the Democrats who show up are going to vote that way, about the same for Republicans. There are more Republicans registered in the state than Democrats, so Republicans get a bit of an edge that way. But if you look at the national and the statewide polls on health care, it turns out the independents are closer to the Democrat side of that issue. Independents are more likely to say that health issues in general are more important to them. And you also find among independents and among Democrats, less so among Republicans in polls, that there's increasing support for the Affordable Care Act, for some semblance of, if not universal health care, which is a separate issue, at least maintaining what we have now since about 2010. And Medicare for All has become an issue. That was part of Bernie Sanders' campaign, and it's resonating pretty well. Scholten is a case in point. A congressional candidate has picked up on that. Not all Democrats like that. Some of them want to kind of run away from that particular issue, see it as a bit too socialistic.
Right. I've seen that. Okay, so we've talked about Fred Hubbell, and we've talked about some of the other, and of course Kim Reynolds and the big statewide races. But what's the difference in how healthcare is talked about in a statewide race versus state house race, maybe for a Senate seat or a House of Representatives seat?
Well, it's in a sense the difference between wholesale and retail politics, you know. You can go on the airwaves and reach roughly 2 million registered voters in the state. You can, in principle, reach all of them through an ad like on WI.
Right.
If you're trying to get more targeted information into all the minds and the voting thoughts of the 30,000 or so people who would be living, there wouldn't all be voters, but 30,000 or so people who'd be living in one of the 100 House districts in the state, you got to target it a lot more, and you've got to localize the issue. So things that work on a very broad gauge, arguing, say, Medicare for all, might work okay in Story County, in Johnson County, in Lynn County, and a few other places. The more rural counties, not so much.
Right.
So you really have to target that message.
Why do you think, and this is a really big question, so bear with me, and we only have about 45 seconds left, but why do you think that Congress has not acted on fixing the problem that is the Affordable Care Act? And do you think that that will mean, because nothing's happened, that there will be a change in the federal level in who has power because people want change in what's happening with the Affordable Care Act?
Well, if you take the argument that the Affordable Care Act is getting increasingly popular, that makes it harder for Republicans to force through a complete repeal. It's not that they can't try again. One sort of sad reason why another effort might be in the offing during the lame duck session of Congress after the election is because John McCain's not around anymore in the Senate. You may remember his dramatic thumbs down negative vote that made the difference in the outcome, at least in the Senate, of the vote on the Affordable Care Act's repeal. And he's been replaced, on a temporary basis at least, by John Kyle, who was very much in support of repeal. So it's not impossible that Republicans would give it another shot. But politically, it could be nearly lethal for Republicans down the road, because that's not a popular position right now.
Max Shelley, thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Sabrina.
We'll take a short break. We'll be right back.
Friday Night Blitz is back, a full hour telling the stories of your teams. Local 5 Sports shows you more highlights from more games than anyone else. Share with us using hashtag Local5Blitz and watch Fridays at 10:35 on Local 5.
Friday Night Blitz is sponsored by Fairway.
I started as a meat cutter with Hy-Vee, and through hard work and dedication to customer service, I was blessed to rise to Group Vice President.
Kenan Judge, running for Iowa House.
My wife Kathy and I raised our 4 daughters here in Waukee. They had great opportunity growing up. That's what I want for children across Iowa. I'm Kenan Judge, and I'm asking for your vote. Because with compromise and hard work, we can deliver more for Iowa families.
I'm David Young, and I approve this message.
Cindy Axne couldn't name any issue where she disagrees with Nancy Pelosi.
I think where we stand right now, there probably aren't that many issues that I agree with.
Now, Axne endorses Pelosi's radical agenda.
I think Nancy Pelosi's agenda has been to try and help hardworking families.
Pelosi's agenda, a nearly $3,000 tax hike on Iowa families. Pelosi and Axne even want to raise the death tax on family farms. Cindy Axne, another vote for Pelosi's radical agenda.
Excuse me, this bill is almost double what I was expecting.
Well, it covers all your work, and then some.
Then some?
Like office supplies.
Those are fish.
Well, I'm off to the club.
Then some?
Okay, let's try something new.
And here's your statement.
I could hug you.
Bring it in.
At Aspen Dental, we're a different kind of dentist. That's why we offer a free new patient exam. Schedule online or call 1-800-ASPEN-DENTAL.
Friday Night Blitz is back, a full hour telling the stories of your teams. Local 5 Sports shows you more highlights from more games than anyone else. Share with us using hashtag Local5Blitz and watch Fridays at 10:35 on Local 5.
Friday Night Blitz is sponsored by Fairway. You're watching This Week in Iowa, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Iowa.
Welcome back, everyone. We're finishing up our show with a discussion about human trafficking and what Iowa leaders can do to stop it from happening in our state. So we're joined now by David Lorenzen, who is with the Iowa Department of Transportation. Thank you so much for being here, Dave.
Thank you for having us.
The DOT has been hosting these different events across the state, kind of informing the public and also law enforcement about human trafficking. So what have those events been like? What are you telling people, and why is this important?
Well, the human trafficking globally involves 21 million people, 7 times the size of Iowa. It's a $150 billion enterprise, so it's very, huge. It's second only to drug trafficking and soon going to surpass that. In Iowa, what we're telling people is there's such a denial that it doesn't happen in Iowa, and it does. And so the events that we participated in is we've aligned with a group out of Denver, Colorado called Truckers Against Trafficking. The nexus is that the work we do every day, we have a really strong correlation with the trucking industry. We do about 50,000 commercial vehicle inspections a year. We interact with thousands of drivers roadside. So it was a good group for us to align with. And basically, we're just taking the message out to tell people that if you see something that doesn't look right, say something about it. We give them a resource, some resources to utilize, some things to look for, and then to call the National Human Trafficking Hotline so that information can be taken in and gotten out to the right law enforcement agency in a very timely manner.
So where is this happening? I feel so silly thinking, gosh, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that.
You know, a lot of us say that, and we probably have seen it. Places that it happens is anywhere where there's large groups of people. In Iowa, some of the events that we see that spike the human trafficking websites that the traffickers use to advertise their services are events like the Iowa State Fair, the Drake Relays, the NCAA basketball playoffs, the Farm Progress Show. All those events have large groups of people coming in. So again, the traffickers prey on that audience, and unfortunately, in that audience, there can be people that buy those services, which generates the human trafficking aspect.
Wow, my mind is being blown right now. So what should people be looking out for if they're out in public?
You know, things that just don't look right. The information that we give out at the training sessions and seminars that we conduct, we also have in all 39 rest areas in Iowa. So that information is easily accessible for the general public. Things if you see a group of people that just doesn't look like they should be together, if you see people that look like they're being, they're held against the will, lack of eye contact, those types of things, just the general things that you would see. The biggest problem is that people say, I don't know if I should make that call to the human trafficking hotline because I really don't know if it's human trafficking. Make the call, let them decide if it is or it isn't, because the call you don't make could have been the one that you should have made.
Wow, that is just absolutely petrifying to think about. So what is this relationship with the truck drivers like? I mean, is that kind of also where it's happening? Who's partaking in this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that question because the trucking industry has been a great partner, and they've gotten kind of a bad take on this. People say that all this occurs at truck stops. Mm-hmm. There's prostitution at truck stops. There's human trafficking at truck stops. It does happen at truck stops, but truck stops and trucking companies and truck drivers have been some of our greatest advocates to help us to fight this. There's 3.5 million commercial drivers on the roads every day throughout the United States. There's not 3.5 million cops that have availability to do those things. There's another set of eyes and ears out there. They're going to see things that we don't see as law enforcement officers. They're going to be able to be in places we can't be. When we pull in with our marked cars and these uniforms, all the climate changes pretty quick.
Right.
So we're asking them, you know, you're going to see things. You're out there 24 hours a day, all over the United States. If you see these things, call them in. We've had success with this model. We've had documented cases where people have been rescued because of drivers making those calls.
Wow, incredible. Okay, this is a really daunting question, and I know you said, well, that's a big question, but what can be done on a law enforcement level at the State House to prevent this from happening? Can it be legislated?
You know, I think that we've gotten better. Our legislature has attended to some of those issues. Again, a strong set of prosecutory laws that we can make sure that it doesn't do any good if you may see, for instance, in the paper some days where some police department ran a sting and they arrested 50 men and 50 prostitutes or whatever, you know, and we're not really solving the problem there. We need to go after the source, which is the human traffickers. So tough laws that when those traffickers are arrested, that there's prosecution that will be solid, that will put them away and stop this.
Wow, it's just hard for me to believe that that is happening right under our nose. Thank you so much for informing the public. That is so important.
Thank you.
We'll take a short break and then we'll be right back.
How can you trust David Young with your health care when you can't trust him with the truth? David Young hasn't.
Always fought for protecting Iowans with pre-existing conditions.
Fact is, he took over $300,000 from insurance interests and voted for a bill the AARP says would allow insurance companies to charge Americans with pre-existing conditions more. David Young, bad on health care, trouble with the truth. House Majority PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
More reasons to re-elect Michael Fitzgerald, State Treasurer. 1. Returned over $250 million in unclaimed property through the Great Iowa Treasure Hunt. 2. Helped over 240,000 families save $5 billion through College Savings Iowa. 3. Lowered the cost of College Savings Iowa 7 times in 12 years. And 4. Earned over $1.8 billion in interest for Iowa taxpayers. Integrity, trust, fiscally responsible. Michael Fitzgerald, State Treasurer.
This is the best day ever.
America's Got Talent contestant Amanda Menem is using her voice to silence bullies.
You just have to surround yourself with positive people.
Then entertaining with Damaris Phillips.
You have all of this for 10 ingredients.
And this Master Chef champ puts his spin on stuffed salmon.
I pronounce that L in salmon.
Well, why would they put it in there if they don't want you to talk about it?
Plus, he ran a 7-day, 155-mile race. But he didn't do it alone.
Today at 9.
On Local 5.
98 degrees is too hot. 98 miles an hour is too fast. And voting with Republican leadership 98% of the time is too much. Representatives Kevin Kester, Peter County, and Jake Highfield do what their Republican leadership tells them to do 98% of the time. Putting women's health care in jeopardy, refusing to end Medicaid privatization, and using nearly $2 million of taxpayer money to settle sexual harassment suits in the state legislature. Kester County and Highfield, the wrong priorities for Iowa.
Have a great weekend. Go